There are many words that can describe Studio Trigger: exciting, grandiose, emotional, insane, and wacky. All of these things can be attributed to Studio Trigger's works over the years since the company was formed. With its penchant for off-the-wall storytelling, Studio Trigger has amassed such an incredible following for more than a decade, but why is that? Why was this fairly new company managing to achieve success only being around for 13 years? What was their strategy? What was their plan? What were they cooking? Hey, it's Leon Brando, and in this video we're going to explore the wild and joyous world of Japanese animation studio, Studio Trigger. We're going to go over the company's inception and the beautiful minds that helped create this studio and the works that shaped their legacy for years to come. So without further ado, here is the Anime Studio Deep Dive, Studio Trigger. With anything, there exists a beginning. For Studio Trigger's beginning, it starts with two rather important men. These men being Hiroyuki Imaishi and Masahiko Otsuka. Now who are these guys, you're asking? Well, I'll tell you. Hiroyuki Imaishi was born and raised in Tokyo to a middle-class family. When he turned 10 years old, he went and saw the theatrical version of Mobile Suit Gundam, sparking his love for the series and the model kits. When he attended middle school, he joined a cinema club, but at that stage he'd draw his own manga. Upon finishing high school, he had a dream of one day being an animator, and that was exactly what he wanted to do when he enrolled in university. Only thing is that his vision did not coincide with the vision of what animation and storytelling should be within said university. Hiroyuki Imaishi was also a fan of Studio Gainax and saw an advertisement for a hit 90s anime television show, Neon Genesis Evangelion. This would end up being the first ever anime he got to work on. There would be another prominent figure working at Gainax on the same show though. That man being Masahiko Otsuka. Masahiko Otsuka initially started out as an assistant director in filmmaking, with the first ever studio he joined was Studio Ghibli, makers of classics such as Spirited Away, Kiki's Delivery Service, and most recently, The Boy and the Heron. Otsuka worked on Neon Genesis Evangelion as an assistant director. This wouldn't be the only series Otsuka would be an assistant director on. Other series includes Gurren Lagann and Panty and Stocking, big standout series for the studio. Studio Gainax was going through a definite shift in tone for the series they would create after the success of Evangelion. A lot of the staff entering into these projects were on the younger side, so working alongside minds as hungry and imaginative was able to help curate a lot of the wackier series you'd see being produced. Imaishi was able to better his craft under the tutelage of Kazuya Tsurumaki. Kazuya Tsurumaki was the director of Fooly Cooly. Seeing the tone and style of Fooly Cooly, it didn't serve as a shock that the imaginative nature of that show would follow through into Gurren Lagann. Speaking of Gurren Lagann, this would serve as the first series that would appoint Hiroyuki Imaishi as the series director. Armed with the younger staff we touched on a bit earlier, he wanted to utilize them to the best of their ability. It was with this creative fire that would play into the show and ultimately what structured Studio Trigger into the studio that we know of today. After they finished production on these series, Otsuka and Imaishi would come together and think about the future of both of their careers, whether or not to move to a different studio or to go independent. They chose the latter over the former, and Studio Trigger was founded on August 22, 2011. Masahiko Otsuka stated that, "We were afraid to become too dependent on the particular studio. In order to secure a permanent and stable environment that allows our freedom was to go independent and take responsibility for ourselves." Otsuka and Imaishi wanted to brand Studio Trigger as a place that took creative risks, a place where the unconventional became conventional for them. And with their independence, they would create a short film called Little Witch Academia as a part of 2013's Anime Mirai Project, which is an annual project made by the Japanese Animation Creators Association funded by the Japanese government's Agency of Cultural Affairs as a means of supporting up-and-coming animators. In 2013, Studio Trigger would have a Kickstarter for Little Witch Academia 2, which was the working title at the time. Studio Trigger would say in their Kickstarter messages that, "Being a new studio, we felt the Kickstarter system to be innovative and fitting to our studio's taste. Making a series with the fans is definitely what we were looking for. With the support from our fans, we believe that we could definitely develop on this new foundation." Studio Trigger would then amass their stretch goal starting at $150,000 in a little under 6 hours. To say this was a massive feat would be an understatement for the at the time brand new animation studio. When the Kickstarter was finally closed, the campaign had been pledged a staggering $625,518. The vision of where Studio Trigger would take themselves would soon be realized. Studio Trigger has a very particular animation philosophy. I talked earlier about their penchant for creative risks, but Studio Trigger was very set on freedom of creativity. They would even extend their hand to fans to see if they could come up with ideas that they might be interested in portraying. Otsuka wanted Trigger to be a studio that can't be predicted. Studio Trigger has a very distinct art style. While other animated shows have a cleaner and more modern feel to them, Studio Trigger's animation style is very reminiscent of anime from the late 90s to early 2000s. It has a very vintage feel, and this was by design. Kill la Kill is a perfect example of this due to it reflecting the exact design philosophy that Imaishi and Otsuka were looking for. Hiromi Wakabayashi, another animated creative officer on Kill la Kill, had this to say on the style of the show. He says Kill la Kill's presentation is very old school anime, it's what our generation grew up with, it feels nostalgic to us. With Kill la Kill being an original work for the studio, they were allowed to fully exercise the creative freedom with regard to the production. Characters' facial expressions, the way in which the action scenes flow, it has all the mark of what Trigger's animation will look like going forward. Studio Trigger is comprised of fans first. Every piece of media that the animators, directors, writers, anyone involved in the production have watched, they make sure their inspirations are heavily imbued within the shows they develop, but also giving it that Studio Trigger touch-up that all of these shows have. For Trigger, their personal enjoyment is a must-have. The team is not satisfied with just simply adapting a work or just making one just to make it. Emaishi stated that he gets bored very easily. He wants to do something new for every series the team works on in an event to avoid boredom. Every Trigger product has striking visuals and a roughly drawn art style to make it stand out from what you normally see. Each series they work on has vastly different subject matter and tone than the rest. The series will feel like a Trigger work, but characterization and the story will differ from the ones prior. Trigger has a set tone of shows feeling very lighthearted and nonsensical. The comedic timing, the background, everything is being done in this specific way to make sure the audience is engaged with what they're viewing. These design choices are had so that Trigger makes works that will be remembered in a decade's time. For as creative as they want to be, the team at Trigger wants to give audiences a worthwhile experience that sticks with them for years to come. The soundtracks are also very much at play with this tactic. For Kill la Kill, they enlisted the help of famed composer Hiroyuki Sawano. Now, Hiroyuki Sawano is widely known for his work on the soundtrack for hit anime TV show Attack on Titan. Sawano's music is able to make every scene seem that much more important. In regard to Kill la Kill, the soundtrack was memorable due to the fact that it got across how grand and larger than life the show was trying to portray to the viewers. It is a soundtrack that is still regarded as one of the best anime soundtracks 11 years later. Kill la Kill being Trigger's first official animated show, the team would take the anime world by storm. It was a shakeup in the year 2013, a show with this style, fast-paced action, a premise that takes up at breakneck speed, and stellar soundtrack. The Studio Trigger would put their foot down on their introduction in the anime world as a fledgling company that made you pay attention to what they were making. It quickly rose to being one of the most successful and popular animes of that year. This style is however not only akin to Kill la Kill. In their first ever feature film, Promare was released in 2019 and had a premise of a group of firefighters and mechs to protect the world from a group called the Mad Burnish. Promare would go on to amass $9.6 million worldwide and will return in theaters for one day only on December 8, 2019 under the name Promare Redux. Keeping up with the differing styles of animation, Promare utilizes more CG in the film than prior works. It worked to seamlessly blend the 2D animation with the 3D CG. This was a design choice by Emaishi. Emaishi was asked about the dynamic camera angles and choreography of Promare and was asked if he did anything different from the usual. Emaishi stated he wanted to have longer shots of action scenes in the movie, making sure to not break away at any given moment for it. He expressed how it can get exhausting seeing long action scenes in animation, but he wanted to give it his all with the action scenes. Studio Trigger, while having a set identity on their storytelling and animation, they are a company that is still able to reinvent themselves in a way that feels fresh while also still being new to the creators behind the individual projects. To say Studio Trigger has influence outside of Japan would be putting it very mildly, but in particular they have a very strong presence on the Western audience. I talked about Trigger's animation style and how the style they were going for was this retro nostalgic feel to their shows. It would be this stylistic choice that would cement their footing in the Western world. Studio Trigger animes would feel like a Saturday morning cartoon. It looking the way that it does takes you back in time and makes the audience feel very nostalgic. Nostalgia is a very powerful tactic in the business world and an even stronger emotion for people to feel, but with Trigger they wanted to share this emotion with the viewers because it's something that's very important to them as well. Studio Trigger as a company wants to feel very connected with its fan base, so they can share the same experiences they had working on it in contrast to the viewer just watching the product. They are fans like you're a fan, and with their shows they reiterate this sentiment to you repeatedly. Due to shows being very abundant in passion and very full of life, it resonates with fans in the West. Everything was inventive. It would make people feel like a kid again doodling in their notebooks. It also helped that Trigger were fans of Western animation and set influences are put into their shows as well. Characters from cartoon shows would appear as background characters in their anime. Shows like Inferno Cop, Space Patrol Lulico, BNA, and SSSS Gridman would all share these same influences, even with one of their most recent showings where they would collaborate with Disney to produce an episode for Star Wars Visions. Studio Trigger would also do work for other Western TV shows. They animated the Season 2 intro of Adult Swim series Black Dynamite, did the opening animation for Cartoon Network series OKKO Let's Be Heroes. Takafumi Hori, who was an animator for Trigger, assisted Cartoon Network for an episode of Steven Universe, and their smash hit anime adaptation of CD Projekt Red's Cyberpunk 2077 into Cyberpunk Edgerunners, which also received overwhelming critical acclaim and won the Anime of the Year award at the 2023 Crunchyroll Awards. A statement made by Trigger says, "What we want to do is support and communicate with the fans who enjoy our titles and cheer us on no matter where they are from, Japan or otherwise. It's with this that the studio wanted their brand to be ever expansive, to be able to breach barriers and to make sure their product isn't just exclusive to a Japanese audience, but to an audience worldwide. One where everyone can enjoy the content and is accessible to all." I brought up before that Studio Trigger has a knack for their sense of scale. They have numerous set pieces that portray how grand their worlds are, and their sense of scale can be very cinematic, which helps give it a unique feel when viewing other works. To be passion driven first and foremost, and to continue this business model for well over a decade spoke to Trigger's inherent philosophy behind the company. Studio Trigger has been a fan favorite anime studio since its creation. It's been able to keep viewer attention due to the amount of products they've released over the years that were interesting in more ways than one. A company that believes in creative liberties, to just do whatever they feel like in the moment because it's fun to them and to share that fun with the viewers. To have a company that wants to feel so ingrained with its core base, to want to make fans feel like they're a part of the journey with the production of the series is something not many studios do or even consider. Trigger made their mark with anime fans by being the wild child, by going, hey, we're going to be the weird ones, to be the risk takers, to challenge norms, to burn as brightest as they can. In 2024, Trigger has been producing the anime adaptation of hit manga Delicious in Dungeon, which is currently airing on Netflix. It's a story with the wild nature that Studio Trigger longs for, so a series like that was right up their alley. But there is a wilder anime out there that it would soon return to. At Anime Expo in 2022, Studio Trigger was Shock the Anime World, a continuation of 2010 anime series Panty and Stocking, originally under the rights of Studio Gainax, was confirmed to return under Studio Trigger. The series was originally set to have a season 2, but it never came to fruition. Numerous people speculated as to what the fate of the series was, but more and more people eventually gave up on wishing for a continuation. Until Studio Trigger pulled through and announced that they would be producing the next season. And the following year in 2023 at Anime Expo, they confirmed that they acquired the rights to Panty and Stocking from Studio Gainax, fully owning the IP and not just licensing it. The team behind Panty and Stocking were always very adamant on making more of the series, but higher-ups were moving on to other projects. Hope was kept alive, and in a miraculous situation, one thought impossible named Maishi himself, they were able to secure the rights. The staff even made a joke about them having so many ideas that they could make 10 seasons in a movie called The Battle of Hoover Dam, which for how long the show has been held under a different studio for a decade plus, I wouldn't doubt them on this. Studio Trigger has seen the success that they have because they're a studio that has stayed true to themselves even after all the time has passed. They are still hungry for showcasing new content like they were when they first started, the staff all having a blast where they are. They don't have to feel like they're chasing trends, just producing content that they see fit. You can always tell a Trigger anime from other series going on. It's always a positive when people can pick up in no amount of time that something is made by a particular studio or director. There are many things left for Trigger to accomplish, other more insane stories to tell, more adventures for people to go on. Of course, they don't stop at just creating anime. Studio Trigger is also on YouTube where they showcase a lot of their illustrations and do live drawings of their iconic characters. They also have audio commentaries of shows they've worked on as well. They recently did a commentary watch along of Cyberpunk Edgerunners. Studio Trigger also has a Twitch channel where you can see the masterful artists do live drawings on there as well. They also have streams where they build keyboards as well. Always good to have range in what you do. This helps them stay more in touch with the fans and keep up with the times as they've shown before. They have a knack for doing that. Studio Trigger is here to stay, and they have a lot more to give to the wild world of anime, so to Studio Trigger, keep on creating and inspiring and giving people the worlds they've come to love. It is always appreciated. And always, just being hype as hell. Thank you all for watching the video. This is something I've wanted to make for a while, and I want to talk more about anime studios in the future, so for you guys, tell me your favorite Studio Trigger animes in the comments. Trigger definitely had an impact on yours truly, and I wanted this to showcase how far they've come as a whole. But that's enough out of me. I've been Leon Brando, and I'll be seeing you all next time.